Welcome back. Well, the country is in a fast-deteriorating economic climate with no apparent path out of the predicament. This is according to businessman Sipho Pityana. Pityana says corporate South Africa has tried to share its thoughts with the government, but it's not being heard. In an opinion piece in the Financial Mail, Pityana says the president fails to see the urgency in dealing with the issue. He joins me now for conversation. Thanks all for joining us this morning.
Faith, good morning to you and your viewers.
I must ask you, do you think that the president is failing to see the urgency, or the president does not want to entertain the sense of urgency at the moment? Not that he's failing, but just that I think maybe he's got other issues that he needs to address at the moment.
Yeah, well, I'll be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to extend my condolences on behalf of business to the family of Dade Maponya on his passing and the great contribution that he's made to business. As you know, if he was a white person in South Africa, he would have been a multi-billionaire. He would have succeeded many times more.
100%.
It says a lot about where we come from. Just to come back to your question, it's not inevitable that we can be a failed state. If we don't take action, though, we would be a failed state. There's a lot of things that show that the economic condition is deteriorating and so fast because we're not taking the actions that we need to be taking. And they range from a whole plethora of things. One of them, which we are facing, and we try to persuade government to have an engagement with business about, is the issue of sovereign rating downgrade prospect that we are facing if we don't take necessary decisions and announce those in the State of the Nation address and indeed in the budget statement. So it's not enough to say that we're in a crisis and all of this. We can't repeat the same things. We need to speak to a program that begins to rein in. 2 years ago, when we were in a job summit, business made the point that the job summit commitments were mitigative steps, but there were fundamental things that needed to be done to address the macroeconomic environment, to begin to ensure that the structural conditions that make for an economy that is job shedding, even as we make commitments to those job summit arrangements, that it doesn't continue to lose jobs. We have not addressed those things. So we've seen, notwithstanding the commitments that are made, companies shedding jobs and the employment condition deteriorating. So it must say that we need to look at things differently.
I hear you, Sipho, but it goes back to my question. These are questions and these are recommendations that you've raised countless times as business, right?
Yeah.
Then my question is it the president is not listening to you, or is it the president has got other issues to worry about than listen to some of those even decisive measures that you're actually speaking about in this article? Tackling the energy crisis, being very deliberate about especially those individuals that are in leadership positions in state-owned enterprises but are choosing to loot the very same state-owned enterprises. We know the problem. So my question then is, does he not want to listen to you as business, or is he just choosing to deal with other issues?
Well, on the one hand, to the extent that he repeats the same things that we say need to be done and need to be addressed, the problems of corruption in state-owned entities, the fixing of the state, the crisis in the macroeconomic environment, it does suggest that he hears and understands what we have to say. What bothers us is that there's a gap between that understanding of what needs to be done and execution on some of those things. So it raises the question as to why is it that we can't move on these issues to make
why
sure
do you think that you can't move on those issues?
Well, I raised this point in my statement that as far as we're concerned as business, it starts with a lack of cohesion in government. There are contradictory statements that are coming from different cabinet ministers on where the economy should be going. And to the extent that the executive constitutionally is the president, our expectation is that the president reins everybody into line to say this is where the country is going, this is what we're doing, and you don't have an option of ministers pronouncing themselves in different ways on different issues, because it raises a crisis of confidence in the economic direction that we are choosing. It says something about a lack of clear path of what it is that we're doing. But importantly for me is that we shouldn't be making promises to South Africans that we're going to create jobs, that we're going to, that there's going to be an improvement in a range of things. Now we're having a big debate about whether the ESCOM board has misled the president or not. But the fact of the matter is that 2 years ago, a board of ESCOM was changed, and the current president, as deputy president at the time, made the point that this was at the advice of the business concerned about what needs to be done. And the new board made a whole range of proposals of what needed to be done to rein in ESCOM. A technical team was appointed. It also made a range of proposals of what needs to be done. And a lot of those proposals have actually not seen the light of day.
The incoherence that you're speaking about, I mean, a lot of the incoherence, we're actually seeing it unfold in the media. It's quite disappointing to know that the deputy president of the country will say one thing, the presidency will say another thing, ESCOM will say something completely different, right?
Yeah.
So in the incoherence that you're speaking of, does that say a lot about the manifestation of factionalism within the governing party, which ultimately is responsible for some of the policies and the decisions that we see from a government level, right? Because it's a governing party. Is this the manifestation of the factionalism that has existed within the ruling party for such a long time that the incoherence is now playing out even in the media space, and therefore is hampering on the ability of the president to make decisive decisions?
Well, South Africans should be absolutely impatient, as we are in business, about that, because the reality of the matter is that we don't have time to be dithering, because our economic condition is deteriorating, and so very fast, and the social consequences of that are quite manifest. We now have a problem with municipalities, where municipal workers sometimes are told that they may not be paid their salaries. Dinel was in the same space last year. We had a big problem with SAA and other state-owned entities. The issue is we are being shown what the manifestations of the deep-seated crisis in these state institutions are, but we're not actually being shown what it is that we are deciding to do about them. And that's what the business economic endeavor is wanting to focus on in conversation with government, to say, what is it that we're going to do with regard to this? You see, we're not looking for short-term solutions. All we want, so that we can plan, we can prepare, that there isn't enough energy, electrical energy supply. So this is what it means in terms of what it is that we can do, so that we can plan accordingly. Yeah. But also want acceleration of alternative options of energy supply, because without electricity, as I indicate in my piece, the country is doomed, let alone the economy. The reality of the matter is that we need to fast-track processes of diversifying sources of energy generation.
Sipho, you know, from your mouth to the president's ears, hopefully that this message lands, and lands quite swiftly, because as you say, that we need to be at a point where we halt sliding into that failed state. But we're going to have to leave our conversation there for this morning. Thanks a lot for joining us. Sipho Pityana there, joining us around his article piece. So the opinion piece is called Halting the Slide to a Failed State. Make sure that you actually get to see it and read more about it. While Canadian